Welcome, Web of Wires! Did you know that Nintendo released a surprising amount of indie games, from small downloadable titles on the Nintendo DS to entries in some of their most beloved franchises? So if these developers can make a Nintendo game, what does being a Nintendo indie game mean? My goal was to answer this question, so I spent hours researching in order to find the answer, and I think I found something interesting. This is the list I compiled of indie games that Nintendo has published. By technicality, everything on this list can be considered indie, but it is a little unfair comparing Harmonite and Snipperclips to a virtual aquarium for your Wii, so we need a few rules in place to narrow down what I consider to be their indie game lineup. The first rule, it has to be made by a small team with either a fixed budget or no budget at all, kinda just the definition of indie games. The second rule, it needs to be an original IP with an original idea. None of that Picross or Tetris Battle Royale stuff. And the last rule is obvious. It just needs to be published by Nintendo exclusively for Nintendo systems. And after these three rules are put into place, that narrows down the list from this to this. Nintendo stepped into the indie landscape back in March of 2006 with Mitchell Corporation's Magnetica, also known as Action Loop in Europe and Shunkin' Puzzloop in Japan. It was a sequel to their previous game, Puzzloop, which was released on 7 systems with 7 separate publishers. Then PopCap released Zuma, a clone of Puzzloop, which led to EA buying out PopCap. You still following? EA then made their new game, Zuma's Revenge, and had plans to release it on the DS. Mitchell Corp demanded Nintendo not to release the game or he would cut ties with them, but Nintendo released it anyways. Why? Well, the first game Mitchell Corporations made was Pang, not Pong, which was a clone of another PC game called Cannonball that released 6 years prior. So why did Nintendo get involved? So I just finished my first time playing Magnetica. Honestly, it was extremely similar to Zuma. I was not expecting it to have as many similarities as it did. I think it's a better game. It feels a lot more in-depth and replayable, especially with the puzzle mode. I thought that was pretty cool. But other than that, I think it really just comes down to personal preference. I think I prefer Zuma. That being said, I could see why people would prefer Magnetica over Zuma. That, in my eyes, is the better game. There's definitely limitations with it being on the 3DS. Nintendo kinda stopped publishing indie games for about 2 years after this, but was eager to start publishing again after the release of their digital storefronts, the Wii Shop channel, and the DSi Shop. The first digital indie game they published was Magnetica Twist, which was a digital-only sequel to their first game. Why? Even though there's no exact number of copies sold, it's safe enough to assume that it made a decent chunk of money because not even 2 months later, Nintendo went on a publishing spree. They started publishing games marketed towards Japanese audiences, with releases like Inazuma 11 going international 3 years after its original release. The cool thing about Nintendo at this time was their hardware. Gone were the days of these super powerful systems, and in came more unique concepts like 2 screens on a handheld or splitting their controllers into 2 pieces and adding motion controls. They started to break the rules of conventional gaming and leaned heavily into making their hardware just as unique as their games, and a lot of indie developers caught on to this. One of the earliest examples you can find was Photo Dojo. At the time, seeing yourself on TV was a pretty cool thing, even if it was just a video you threw together in Movie Maker. But Photo Dojo asked a different question. How do you put yourself in a game? Like, really put yourself in the game, not some just webcam hooked up to your PS2. And the end result of this was fantastic.
This is gonna be your victory pose. This is what happens when you win. Alright.
Looks like a crime scene photo. Because it's so low quality. You ever play Skyrim on PS4? That's what you look like. You ever play Skyrim on PS4? That's what you look like.
Oh, and you gotta get the motion blur.
Can we get this on the camera? I don't know if you guys, it might be too unclear, but it's like a nature documentary.
I think Chipotle is a scam. I think the amount of rice that they put in their food is disgusting. I don't like Chipotle. I said it. I'll put pineapple on pizza.
You can't put this
I will
out.
never put rice on a burrito.
They'll get to you. You don't like rice?
Not on a burrito.
No, for November.
Do you like my Webster?
Dude, Baja Blast, code GSpider. Stop my toe!
This is not fair.
What are you talking about?
Bonsai Barber used the precision of the Wii's pointer to create a game where you had to cut hair for plants, Fluidity used the Wii's tilt control to move the world in all different directions, and quite a few games on the DSi took advantage of having 2 screens. But little old baby Harry never had a Wii. He wishes he had a Wii and missed out on one of my favorite Nintendo indie games, Zenquaria Virtual Aquarium. Instead, he grew up with my favorite handheld, the 3DS. This little system had everything you could want from a handheld at the time, and paired with the Wii U, they were unstoppable. These two systems always struggled with sales. The 3DS had a very rough launch with almost zero reason to buy one for $250, and the Wii U was, They were fantastic sequels to their counterparts, but sold miserably due to a few bad decisions, so Nintendo had to cut corners. They didn't have the funds to develop every game themselves, so they had to rely on other developers to keep up with some of the exclusives, and indies were a great source for this.
When I was a kid, I didn't really have too much money, because, I was a kid. I pretty much just had to scavenge around for like the little Nintendo gift cards that you'd find at like Target or something. So because of this, a lot of the first games that I got were just stupid games like a Nintendo calculator, or like, I think I had Whack-A-Mole. But yeah, one of the games that I remember fondly as a kid was called
Kersploosh, and I believe it was only made by 3 people. It was cute. It was this fun score-based minigame where you had to drop something down a well and not hit anything on your way down. But this objective of smaller teams developing an easy-to-pick-up and hard-to-master loop defined this generation. Harmonite, Boxboy, Pushmo, these were all developed by smaller teams inside their studios and were turned into full franchises. Yes, Nintendo still published games designed around the 3DS's unique features, but they really shifted their focus from smaller titles that could possibly be on your phone by this point to full, genuine games. Stuff that can still be picked up at any time but has a sense of progression and scale that only a video game console can take advantage of because of its more dedicated audience.
So I was going to talk about Dylan's Rolling Western and just how it's a good pick up and play game for like 20 minutes, but I got distracted with their development history. You need to take a look at this.
Yeah, so they made Dylan's Rolling Western, and then right before that was We Play Motion, right after that was Paper Mario Sticker Star and Chibi Robo Ziplash. Then they started to make some actual decent games with HAL Laboratory, and then right after, they got the company shut down in 2023. What a legacy. As of today, the Switch is the newest handheld home console abomination thing from Nintendo. The ability to switch between the TV to handheld was such a unique concept. The 3DS and Wii U, although it still had similar traits and even shared some of each other's libraries, were still 2 separate markets. Not that the Switch was an easier market to capitalize on since the handheld and home console stores were just one big store now, but it meant that developers who prioritized handheld experiences would be getting substantially better hardware. The Joy-Con also made it super easy to create new ideas because of how easy it was to add a second player wherever you are. Still, to this day, companies are trying to replicate the success of the Nintendo Switch with their own handheld alternatives. Most require game streaming like the PlayStation Portal and official Backbone controllers for phones. There are also a few systems like the ROG Ally that play games natively, but having a designated game console meant that every game released on the system is designed with the Switch in mind. It's one of the very few unique properties that make game consoles unique, and Snipperclips does a great job at demonstrating this. Snipperclips was a launch title for the Switch. It was visually intriguing, not too demanding on hardware, and had one of the most unique puzzle mechanics in a video game, where you and your friend had to cut pieces out of each other to solve the puzzles.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have, this is not a treat, I'm sorry, but thank you.
Now rotate. Now you can push the button. Oh!
Oh!
Hey!
Wow, that worked out nicely. You happen to just be in the right place.
The worst gear ever. Oh!
What? Now you decide you're gonna take a shit? Too much.
That maybe?
What is the problem? You gotta poop?
Moment of truth, come on.
Okay.
Alright, sweet, we got one.
Oh, jeez.
Oh!
Oh. Okay.
Oh, what? You keep clicking the
Oh,
button.
Jesus Christ. Oh, God.
There we go. Oh. Okay.
There we go. Oh!
Nope.
Hey! What?
It broke.
Hey! There we go.
Oh, for f***'s sake.
This was the first time that Nintendo launched one of their systems with an indie game. The way I see it, Nintendo is starting to realize that these teams can match or sometimes outperform something that larger studios produce. Although it took a little bit of time for Nintendo to publish their bigger titles, they were still out here publishing games like Flip Wars, Dylan's Dead Heat Breakers, and another entry in the Box Boy series. Still fantastic games, but on June 13th, 2019, they would redefine what it meant to be an indie developer for Nintendo. Brace Yourself Games released their first indie-developed Zelda game, Cadence of Hyrule: Crypt of the Necrodancer. This was a rhythm-based dungeon crawler where the world was controlled by the music's rhythm. Your movement and attacks had to be in sync to the music, and enemies had to follow these rules as well. It was a very unique concept for a dungeon crawler and was executed flawlessly. But good enough to give the team the rights to Zelda? Only one of the biggest and most iconic franchises in video game history. Not only that, but it was treated as a collaboration between both franchises, like Zelda was the smaller game here. This is truly one of the coolest compliments that you could give to someone, and I have nothing but hope that Nintendo continues to do these collaborations. Nintendo published a few more indie titles after this, but less than a year later, a scary little germ came around and put the world on pause. And during this...
Oh, this is just Jump Rope Challenge. One of Nintendo's developers decided to make this during COVID to get people to move a little bit. Nintendo actually saw this and just decided to publish it, and here we are.
So at the end of the day, what actually makes a game a Nintendo game? If Brace Yourself Games can make a Zelda game, if Box Boy and Pushmo can sell enough copies to receive consistent sequels, if Magnetica can catch the eye of Nintendo, what really sets Nintendo games apart? These developers could have looked for other publishers so they can release their games on multiple systems. Even if they were planning to be Nintendo exclusive from the start, why would Nintendo reach out? Although I don't think I have a definitive answer to these questions, I think I have a pretty educated guess. Similar to how Gabe Newell hired the entire team behind Portal because of how impressed he was with the concept, I think Nintendo saw something in these developers that other teams don't have. They had the same passion for making experiences exclusive to video games. They had a good understanding on the hardware that was presented to them. They all attempt to show you something that has never been seen before, even if it's been seen a million times. I don't think you need to be Mario or Zelda to be a Nintendo game. You need to innovate on what we thought was fully realized, and I'm hoping that Nintendo's next home console can prove my point.